Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. My name is Lily Dutay. I'm on the publicity team over here at Soho Press. If you've joined us for the lineup before, thank you for coming back. We have a really wonderful event lined up for you today with two really wonderful authors, of course, to talk about their new books. So before we get into it, I have a little bit of housekeeping stuff. We do this series with the help of Mystery to Me Bookstore based in Madison, Wisconsin. So in order to keep the series going and to keep our local bookstores happy, if you'd like to purchase any of the books that we talk about today, you can do that by going to the little green button that will appear here on the screen very quickly. To purchase the books, we've got one pre-order and one that just came out at the beginning of the month. And they really are a wonderful partner, and we couldn't do this without them. So thank you, Elizabeth, for all of your work. This series is specifically focused on highlighting Soho crime authors and putting them in conversation with one another. Our next event for this year will be on May 14th. It's at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and it'll be a special preview event of Nalima Rao's new book. She'll be talking with Colin Cotterill, and it'll be really wonderful. And you can register for that at sohocrimelineup.com right now if you'd like to. But today we are celebrating two first-in-series installments from Zoe B. Wallbrook and Maha Khan Phillips. They're going to talk a little bit about each of the books, but The Museum Detective by Maha Khan Phillips came out on April 1st, so you are able to purchase that book today. Zoe B. Wallbrook's book, History Lessons, will come out on July 1st, so that is available for pre-order. Both books will come with a special little signed book plate. And we're very happy that you're here. Feel free to put some questions into the little chat box on the right side of your screen. It's a little question mark box. We'll get to them at the very end of the event. And I would also like to issue a very light trigger warning for this event. We have some conversation about some sexual assault and some not so light conversation today. So take care of yourselves. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our authors for the day. Maha Khan Phillips was born in Karachi, Pakistan. She is the author of Beautiful from This Angle, The Mystery of Agni Ruby, and The Curse of Mohenjo-daro. She is a multiple award-winning financial journalist and editor who writes across a number of different journals and magazines. She lives in London with her husband and son and frequently visits Pakistan, where she has a keen interest in exploring archaeological sites. Maha, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Zoe B. Wallbrook is a recently tenured professor whose academic research has appeared in outlets such as the New York Times and the New Yorker. She was selected for mentorship by LA Times bestseller Elizabeth Little, and History Lessons, her first novel, which we're talking about today, was a runner-up for the Eleanor Taylor Bland Award. Zoe's hobbies include beginning all emails with my sincerest apologies for my slow reply, which is relatable, pretending to understand how astrological signs work, and crying at the end of every Call the Midwife episode. She and her husband live with their stalker, a black lab pity mix named Sophie. Zoe, thank you for being here, both of you.
Thanks for having me.
We have had a really wonderful year in this event where we put books together, specifically that on their faces don't look like they will have a ton in common. And I think that this is another one of those cases today where if you put the covers side by side, you think that these are very drastically different books. But there are a lot of overlaps. And we have two protagonists that I think would really get along very well should they meet one another. So I wanted to give you both a chance to maybe introduce yourselves a little bit more than your bios that I just read, and tell us about your protagonists and who they are in the books that we will meet them in. Maybe Zoe, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Zoe, and the book that I've written, History Lessons, has the protagonist named Daphne Ouverture. She is an assistant professor of French history at in a university called Harrison University in a college town called Calliope. And in terms of what she's like, if this is helpful, she is very, very nerdy, which is a requirement, of course, but also at the same time, very compassionate, I think, and empathetic. She's somebody who is, at the beginning when we meet her, she's very comfortable living in the world of books. very comfortable living in the 18th century. Ideally, she would like to just, spend all of her time with 18th century documents and sources, but finds herself having to kind of live in the present a little bit in a way that she wasn't quite expecting, but ends up really, I think, benefiting from and thriving. So a lot of, for Daphne, when you first meet her, she's going to be a little bit more shy and introverted. And by the end of the book, she's really kind of finding her own power and her voice.
Well, hi everyone. That's great to hear actually, because it makes me think about my character too. I'm Maha. My book is The Museum Detective, and my character is Dr. Gul Delani, and she is a museum curator in Karachi in Pakistan, which is where I grew up. And she's quite ballsy as a museum curator in the city that she's in. She's an academic as well. She teaches at the local university. And I really wanted to create a character that sort of doesn't break things down, but navigates misogyny and some of the sort of complexities of being a woman in a man's world with agility and intelligence. And she is very, very intelligent. She's also a bit of an outsider because she isn't necessarily celebrated in her own community for her intelligence. And so she has to go out and find a new community of her own. And she really does. She brings together this band of unlikely characters and misfits. And they're all sort of smart and engaged with the world, but they don't always make sense in a city like Karachi. So a lot of her journey is also the journey of kind of what belonging means in this city. And she's struggling most and primarily with the fact that her much beloved niece is missing from the first page of the novel on, and sort of what is happening with her relationship with this missing character, and also how that is resolved by the end.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the characters are the best place to begin a conversation about these two books because not only I think they would be good friends, but they also just really like are such a wonderful entry point to the stories that you craft so well. And they're people that you like want to know and you're very excited to follow, which is perfect for the beginning of a series. So we'll hear more about them. Obviously, two women who like really test the boundaries of the stuff that they're put into. But I kind of wanted to start, and Maha, your book is based very loosely on a real story about the Persian princess, which is so interesting. So I wanted to ask you if you could tell us about that.
I would love to, because this is literally a case where I couldn't make this up even if I tried. It was such a shocking story that inspired mine. It actually happened 25 years ago now, and to my embarrassment, I didn't hear about it until a few years ago. But what happened was 25 years ago, police in Karachi arrested two men who were attempting to sell an ancient Persian mummy for $11 million. Now, the men claimed that this body was the daughter of King Xerxes, who was one of Persia's greatest rulers. And they had stumbled across this body, and here they were trying to sell it on the black market. And what happened next was just so crazy. So everybody kind of emerged to claim this body. So of course Iran was saying, this is a Persian princess, give her back. The Taliban got involved. The Taliban at the time was busy blowing up all the antiquities of Afghanistan, but this mummy had an $11 million price tag. So they were like, no, 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 she's ours. She was found on our land. The international archaeological community was invested and, of course, questioning the capabilities of their Pakistani counterparts. So everybody was fighting over this body. And then Karachi's only female archaeologist, Dr. Asma Ibrahim, proved over several months that the mummy was, in fact, an elaborate hoax. But not only that, she was likely a murder victim. So someone had potentially murdered a woman and mummified her to sell on the black market. And when the world found out that she was a fake, they dropped her like a hot potato. Suddenly, she was of no value. She was such a commodity. She was her, and nobody ever found out who she was. And what was really poignant for me and haunting for me was the relationship between Dr. Asma Ibrahim, who, tended to and loved this woman and tried to sort of give her justice and find out what happened to her. And the woman herself, who still to this day remains unknown. She was buried in an unmarked grave in the end.
Wow. And I got so engrossed in what Maha was saying, I completely forgot the question. Lily, the question was about like explaining the, like maybe like the plot of the book, kind of conceptualizing it in a nutshell. Yes, just I was so engrossed in what Maha was saying, even though I have read Maha's book, but it's still wonderful to hear it. Anyway, so in my case, what my book is about roughly is that there's this young professor. This is her first year. She just finished her PhD, first year teaching at Harrison University, which is an elite fancy university, so to speak. And she's doing okay. Again, kind of quiet, kind of she has a disastrous dating life, so that's also part of how we first meet her. And what happens in her case is that she receives a text message from a colleague that she doesn't really know very well, nor does she really care for him that much, named Sam. And it's written in French, poor French. She doesn't really know what's going on. And then the next thing she hears is that he's dead. So she's trying to figure out in the story, why did he text her? Why did he text her in French? And then how on earth, or is it possible that his death, or that his life was somehow intertwined with hers, especially as it becomes apparent that somebody is after her, that somebody thinks that she has something that belonged to Sam, even though she doesn't know what it is or why anyone would think that. So as she's trying to figure out this, relationship, this like whatever connection she has with Sam, she's also trying to dodge a killer who is after her, and trying to get that it, whatever it might be that that Daphne is supposed to have. She's trying to get it before Daphne can figure out what it is. And in the process, she really uncovers a lot about, and this is, a conversation that we can have about like what it's also like to be an academic. I think this is where I think Maha and I have a similar kind of approach with our novels, which is really interesting about how do we think about misogyny, sexism in the academy, things like that. What does it mean to be a woman in the academy, and how is she supposed to live in this world that she both loves and adores, but is also occasionally a dark place.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that, I mean, that was like, I really wanted to ask you if that was, sorry, I'm jumping in, but if that was, a sort of from personal experience, like, I mean, in terms of, is this misogyny? Because I have a friend who's a historian who keeps telling me stuff, and I think half of what you say can't be true because it's so, and he's in the States, and then I read your book and I was like, oh my God, it's all true. This is like some crazy stuff happens in these institutions, but yeah, I mean, how prevalent is misogyny and sort of like othering and the rest of it?
I mean, I think that's the thing I find, again, so fascinating about both of our stories are the ways in which I just noticed this, especially with yours, like her interactions with male colleagues, like your protagonist's interactions with male colleagues, the way that they're doubting her knowledge and her expertise, right? And that we see that occasionally with Daphne as well. Yeah, I mean that is something that I think unites our stories, right? As sort of being this underdog in this way. I would also say, I mean, the thing that I love about the category of like academics as amateur sleuths at the same time is that, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I'm really glad that both of our protagonists are academics and professors and not students. There's something so interesting about crossing over to this other world of expertise and authority, and like what does it mean to somehow be a woman of color in a position of authority, and claiming expertise. And that I think the strength of Daphne, as well as the strength of Gul, if I can say that, is their kind of determination to pursue the truth. And to really think through the complexities of the facts and the details laid out before them, if I can put it that way.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really strong part of your novel. So yeah, I have to say just briefly that Gul's experiences, what she dealt with, were all based on the true story of Dr. Asma Ibrahim. So she was in fact, not promoted for 16 years. She had to get a letter from her parents to say that it was okay for her to go on an excavation. She was in her 30s at the time. She did have a fiance who said, it's either me or the archaeology. And she sort of went, see ya. And she told me these stories, and I was like, just blown away by the fact that we live in a world where, this is still the case. Clearly, whatever side of the world you're living in, you're still battling with these issues.
Right, right. And that in Daphne's case, if this is helpful as well, I mean, this is not based on a real person exactly, other than, well, I am a professor in the academy, so I'm sure there is a lot of that going on. But nonetheless, I think there's a similar thing of how can you claim to be an expert on X, Y, and Z, right? And it's also maybe the other thing that's really interesting to think about is like, what are the kinds of disciplines or fields that are somehow gendered a certain way, right? As if archaeology and digging is somehow inherently male, or as if somehow being a historian is somehow inherently male. And that in Daphne's case as well, that she's a historian of France and European history, and the assumption that somehow that would be outrageous that she could talk about France and talk about French history, as a Black woman and things like that. And what kind of expertise could she have? But meanwhile, of course, with my character in particular, she's grown up in a completely francophone French context. She's lived in Paris. She's lived in Ivory Coast. She spent time in Dakar. She's been everywhere. So this is her world. This is very much her world. And the way that I think for your character, Maha, like this is also Gul's world, just steeped in the world of archaeology. Yeah.
And Daphne's writing about a world that people don't actually know that much about.
For sure.
And so she's sort of like claiming a part of history that people haven't examined. And she has, yes. And I think that really struck me that, that not to give too much away, but that she has colleagues who don't remember which woman of color she is in the organization. Of just like,
yes, right. That she's constantly mistaken for another colleague. Yes, which I have had happen to me in a bunch of different contexts. Right. Yeah. So I guess in terms of like, the book is not autobiographical, I promise, but nonetheless, that there are these things that I could really quickly draw from as examples of how she is forced to navigate through the world differently, I think, than other colleagues, sort of white male colleagues in these ways. But that also is the strength. I mean, I think this is also the same thing with your novel, not to put words in your mouth, but there's a way that this ends up being a strength in really great and I think kind of meaningful, moving ways.
Yeah, I think they're definitely outsiders, but also very capable. And yeah. Interesting. We went down a whole different direction. Sorry, Lily.
No, oh my God. I always say everybody has a better time when I don't have to speak, Y'all take it away. You know the books so well, obviously. It did remind me, though, of a quote I wanted to pull out from the Museum Detective. Maha, you put it, understanding history requires understanding the stories people told themselves, the ones that were inevitably flawed, which I love. And obviously, history is another one of these through lines that happens through both of the books. Some ancient history, some not so distant history of like what happened in the last days of this person's life that we're trying to piece together. And I guess I wanted to kind of ask about what your own relationship is to history, why include it in the framework of your novel, and with like a little personal note of, I always thought that it was interesting how in both of your novels you have the true history, but then you also have the history of how everybody interprets it, right? And how that can be different depending on who it is. And I think it is the strength of Daphne and Gul that they are able to kind of like parse through the like objective history versus the personal histories to get to the bottom of what happens ultimately. So yeah, tell us about your personal relationship with history as to academics yourselves and why include them here.
Who goes? Do you want to go first, Zoe? Or do you want me to?
I was going to have you go first, or Lily, do you mind repeating that quote as well from Maha's book again? I just think there's something about it that's so like helpful to.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding history requires understanding the stories people told themselves, the ones that were inevitably flawed.
I mean, that's just human anyway, and that happens on a daily basis to sort of like the long arm of history. But in my personal case, I'm not a historian. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't know why, because looking back, I think I would have loved it. But I can tell you exactly when I fell in love with the world of archaeology and history. And that was when I was 10 years old and we went on a school field trip to the civilization of Mohenjo-Daro, the Indus Valley civilization, which is this unbelievable place. It's sort of like it's 2500 BC. It was a very egalitarian society. You go there and they had indoor plumbing, they had heated water, they had no armies because they didn't need them. And yet only 10% of this one particular site, which is one of many thousands, has been excavated, and the language has not been deciphered. And I just went there and I felt it. I felt the living of history, and I wondered why we didn't know more about it. And I thought about that my whole life. Actually, I ended up writing a book about it, but it was the fact that that history has been lost, and part of it is because, and obviously not lost to everybody, but so many people I know have never really explored the Indus Valley civilizations and have never even heard of Mohenjo-daro. And I think it's because the region has such bad press generally. And it hasn't been explored enough as a result. It's in a country that is under-resourced. It's in terms of its resources for this kind of excavation. And I just wanted to be able to share stories of these amazing places, and that yet nobody really gets a chance to go to and visit and explore. So I'm not a historian. I'm not an academic, but I just loved the opportunity to do that. I mean, Zoe, you are a historian, so I guess for you it's a little bit different, right?
Right. I am a historian. I am an academic. This is very much my world. I mean, I think what I loved about the quote, and also about just your explanation, or like why history. I think history requires, especially for investigative work, which is the heart of both of our stories. History requires so much curiosity. One of my favorite quotes that I teach, undergraduate students is that the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. You have to be so open to confronting human behavior, human norms, cultures, and values that are different from your own, and be curious as to why that is, right? And that what I also think, that is so important, is that the work of the historian is the work of contextualization. That what we're trying to do is figure out the context, trying to figure out not only what happened. I mean, that's one kind of question, but it's the context behind what happened, why it happened, who was involved. How do we understand this world? What are the different ways to interpret what happened that become important, and that requires, I should also say, expertise and training. I mean, that's the thing that I think I love about the opening of Museum Detective in particular, is there's a way that you see how quickly the protagonist Gul can kind of dive into the world of thinking about hieroglyphics, thinking about, I mean, just all kinds of the materialities of the past that we see, in terms of the details on the sarcophagus. I hope I'm not giving things away, but it's the details that create that contextualization, that is just very much the historian's bread and butter, that leads them on the pathway to uncovering something, making a claim, making a discovery, and that really, I think, just works as a strong parallel to the kind of investigative work that detectives do, and others, right? It's a work of contextualization. It's a work of following something to the point where you start, some people might think you're a little bit mad, like you just refuse to let something go. You're like, I need to figure out how I can make sense of this clue, right? I need to find this clue. I need to find where it leads to. I need to find, how far down this rabbit hole I can go.
And that's what Daphne ends up doing in a kind of contemporary setting as a historian, but she's excavating the near past. I mean, she's literally excavating the last few days and revealing what is true and what is not true. It is really interesting that she is a historian, and you see her historian thinking, but as she's dealing with a very modern crime. I thought that was really fascinating.
Oh, thanks. No, I mean, I think in both of our cases, I would say there's something about historical thinking as method, like that is the method for a kind of detective work that you're doing, right? So right, my book might not be that committed to or interested in a particular moment in the past in order to solve the case exactly. It's not like everything comes down to what happened in France in 1942, or and that's not how this works. But nonetheless, it's the methodologies, it's the techniques and the training that is involved in historical research or archaeological research, both, that somehow end up becoming important to figuring out something much bigger that's happening around you in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If I can also say one other thing, this is from my book, but there is something about, I think the other reason why I love people who are invested in historical research, archaeological research, and the like. This is going to sound so weird, but it's true. There's a way that historians tend to be the Debbie Downers. We tend to be the party poopers. We tend to be the ones to point out that oftentimes things that we think of as novel today or are not novel. There's similar conversations often happening in the past, and that can be maybe sometimes socially ostracizing, I don't know. But at the same time, there's something about it that means then, again, there's a kind of acceptance of, I think being willing to be frowned upon maybe by others, if it means that you are uncovering a truth or a story that is worth telling. I think it doesn't mean that Daphne is an odious character, or the opposite. I write stories where people, you genuinely want to root for the characters in my story. But nonetheless, that it just means that she's, I think, maybe a little bit more comfortable than others with accepting that what she finds is maybe going to be different than what people are expecting, something like that.
And that too is a strength of hers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to, we're going to pivot just like a tiny bit. And I'm trying to gather exactly how I want to say this, because there's a way that it all dovetails, but I'll wait, I suppose. But I want to talk about like the layers of history lessons for a moment, because we've got this like really bright, like fun cover that's super pick-upable, and we have talked a lot about some of the like deep topics that history lessons covers, and so I do want to dive like a little bit deeper, if we may. Not only is there misogyny explored here, and some racism, and just like a whole bunch of really gross stuff, but we also do kind of talk a little bit about sexual assault, who gets to be seen as a victim of sexual assault, specifically when it happens within academic institutions. And I think that that's like something that we should just call out here. That's a big part of the book. And I want to talk about like what conversations do you hope the book inspires, and like kind of the mission statement, I suppose, for lack of a better word, with and then we'll talk about like how much fun the book is too, because it really is. It's just like the full package here.
I was gonna say, I promise my book is fun. I promise it's got some funny stories, like funny moments. So in terms of the mission statement, I originally started writing this in part because of my frustration with how narratives of sexual harassment and sexual assault have gone. That, at least within the context of the United States, oftentimes the victim that we can often portray in our heads is a white woman, right? But the irony being, I remember at some point learning that the founder of the Me Too movement, for example, was a Black woman, was a woman of color, right? But that somehow, like, how quickly she was getting erased from the narrative of sexual assault and sexual violence, even though, and so for me, this was just kind of a way to explore that a little bit, and trying to find a balance, which is, what we can talk about between, not being heavy-handed with it, but at the same time pointing out, I think using this novel to point out this kind of absence or this gap between, I think, our narratives of who is a victim versus the realities, or not simply only realities, but versus, the more complex portrayal of violence in the United States and elsewhere, right? So the ways in which, like, how are women of color absent from our conversations? So that's to come at one point years ago. I was jokingly calling my my novel something like cozy mystery for intersectional feminists, right? Like, right, as a way to try to be like, it can be fun, but we can also like talk about these things, but also have fun, right? It was kind of me trying to figure out how to do that work.
Yeah. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Cozy mystery title for intersectional feminists. I love it.
Yeah.
I think, can I just
yes, please.
I think that was one of the most powerful things about the novel was that you were dealing with and you were exploring these really important and complex issues, and yet we were laughing alongside Daphne and her friends when you're exploring these wonderful female relationships, this incredible family. She was falling in love, and so it's not easy to hold all these things together.
Yeah.
So well done, but it was a lot of fun.
Thanks.
So yeah, it was. I can't imagine that must have been a tough juggling act, but you did it really well.
In some ways, but I would also say, I mean, maybe this is, me also putting on my like cozy mystery for intersectional feminist hat again. I mean, there's some things that I think if we only think about certain kind of lives through the lens of oppression and violence, then we miss out on the joy that these are people who are also joyful, experiencing, all of the feelings, experiencing, all of different life experiences. So how do we portray that as well? How do we portray all of these complexities? And that, I think, again, the thing I love about both of our novels is there's a way that we see them navigating oppressive environments, but it's not necessarily determining their actions. Yeah. It's not stopping them, and that they still can find love and meaning and joy and friendship and found family and all of these things, right? In the face of oppression, misogyny, violence, these other things.
Thank God. Otherwise, it would all be very bleak. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a few fun little questions, so we're not in the bleak anymore.
Okay.
Maha, what is the most interesting mummy fact that you learned while you were researching for this book that you didn't have time or you didn't have room to include? You couldn't include.
I had to remove 99% of the mummy facts that I had in this novel, and it broke my heart. I briefly alluded to one in the book, but it's such a compelling one that I have to talk about it in more detail, which is that I found out that mummy brown was a really, really popular paint color in the Victorian period. And actually, since the time of the pre-Raphaelites, mummy brown was really popular. And what it was they would bring over from Egypt all these mummies and then grind them up into potions, into sort of like body juices. So it's quite macabre. And then sort of use them as paint. And the Victorians particularly loved it and displayed their drawing rooms full of mummy brown paint. And it was literally made from the resins of these body parts. And it was so popular that I'm going to ask you to guess when it stopped getting manufactured.
Oh, no.
I'm
so scared.
I'll tell you.
No. Okay, can I guess? Okay, so Victorian era mummy brown. In terms of manufacturing, do you mean made with mummies or just the color itself?
Made with the pigment. The pigment made from mummies. Yeah.
I would hope that this practice would have stopped by like 1920 or something.
It was 1964. 1964 when the last paint company, C. Robertson and Company, announced that they could no longer make this paint because they had run out of the body parts. And they weren't likely to get any more because now it wasn't something that was done. So I was just stunned. I briefly mentioned it, but yeah, that is never going to leave me, that fact. That's just crazy.
I think that's going to leave me either. So, and now I need to have a way that Daphne rambles on about this particular fact in the book. Yeah.
Daphne needs to come hang out with Gul and they need to go and explore.
There you go. Yes, exactly. Yeah. She'd love to come with on a dig and just ask different questions. Yeah.
How about you? Do you have any weird? Did you discover any
facts that ended up? I mean, so I don't think I have any particular historical facts that didn't end up in this novel. Although what was interesting was I was just thinking about in a different context because Daphne works on the Francophone world, French Empire, including Haiti, and how France made Haiti pay back money as reparations for declaring independence in the early 19th century. And France made Haiti pay back money continually through the 1960s. I want to say as well, right? So there's some sort of, yes, which is, of course, I mean the sort of terrible irony of France demanding money from Haiti for declaring independence because of and France saying, well, we're going to lose all of this money from slavery and from the slave trade, so you have to pay us.
How dare you inconvenience us?
How dare you? Exactly. Now what are we going to do? That's right. Yes, just conquer other places, apparently. But so in terms of other historical facts, I did spend way too much time at one point in a draft of this investigating George Washington's teeth. Right. It's just funny rabbit holes that you go down because Daphne at some point is talking about how, and I think I remember just doing research on this, that a lot of the ways in which modern dentistry got started, including dentures and things like that. There was a French dentist in the 18th century behind a lot of these kinds of practices. So yes, that got me into a rabbit hole looking up George Washington's teeth, which maybe people know, or I don't know if you know, are not actually his teeth.
Whose teeth are they?
Oh, well, okay. So this is where it gets kind of bad. So, and I think it changed over time. So for a while there were wooden parts. That was kind of a common move. Eventually he used the teeth of like enslaved peoples. In his, yeah, sorry. I know, sorry. Okay, yeah. So that's the kind you see, and so understandably, Daphne goes down this rabbit hole of like investigating teeth. So then I then went down this rabbit hole of investigating teeth.
I love it. This could be a whole other conversation. Weird facts we picked up in research.
Let's have it. I love it. I ask that question all the time, and I think those were two of the best facts on the Leader board for sure. Very macabre, but very good facts to know. 1964. Wow.
I mean, I'm sure it would have gone on longer had mummies been in good supply, but they ran out.
Oh. Part of me is like, thank God, but then that's also not great. It's just, there's no winning with this one. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be going down my own rabbit hole, I think. Just this about that. Okay, Zoe, this is your debut novel. And Maha, this is not your debut novel, but would both of you give your advice for anybody who may be working on their first work of fiction?
I guess I'll start by saying two things. One is that I had so little confidence that I never thought I could do it. And it really took other people to push me to do it. And I'm so grateful that they did. But I just think, you have to kind of just be determined and have a little faith. But I also learned very quickly that writing is a process of reiteration. So in my head, I was going to write a novel and that was going to be that. And I didn't realize that actually you write a novel and then you rewrite a novel and you rewrite a novel. And that's how it works. And it was a really, really interesting process to realize that, you're not done at the vomit stage, which is where you think you're done. Like, I got it on the page, I'm done. No, it's more complex and nuanced and painstaking sometimes, but it is really worth it. And I think everyone should just go for it and enjoy it and write what you love. Write about George Washington's teeth and weird mummy paint because nobody else is going to be doing it, and it's really fun.
I love that advice. I think similarly, the number one thing I tell people is to keep going. It's at some point going to be challenging. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. That doesn't mean that it's not worth it. That this is the thing that I love the most is to write. There's something about struggling with putting your prose on to the page that is a beautiful, meaningful, truly human endeavor. And yeah, that it like that, and that again, I mean, echoing I think what Maha said just now, there's going to be revision, there's going to be editing, you're going to have to learn how to do that, you have to learn how to edit. And that for me was new as well. Like Maha, I was like, well, you just write it and then da-da, right? And but that's not at all the case. But that is also part of the work. There's an expression I learned a while ago about like the work itself is the reward. And there's something about that that's true, that there's something about sticking to these kind of messy, thorny processes and seeing them through to the end that is a beautiful and transformative experience, even if it's just really hard at the same time.
I like that. A beautiful and transformative experience. Very much indeed.
Also, your friends and family might think you've lost your mind. So occasionally, it's yes, the wellness check. My brother started doing wellness checks on me at some point just to be like, "Is everything okay? You seem a little down." I'm like, well, I'm always down now, but you know, it's worth it. I think. I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. To give us Daphne, I think it was worth it.
Oh, thank you.
For me.
Okay.
For us.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
There's obviously a lot of research which we've talked about, and I would love to talk about more if you feel so inclined. But I also am curious what books or movies or music or like culture stuff, shows, sort of inspired your books beyond the very like obvious things that we've talked about here. Was there like a soundtrack that you used, or something that maybe came afterwards that you're like, wow, like that really relates really well to the book that I wrote?
Should I go first? Okay. Well, I guess the obvious one is Agatha Christie was a big inspiration in my life, but actually not her work as much as her archaeology. The fact that she went at a time when women weren't doing a lot of archaeology and was sort of exploring the world. And I always thought, what if she had come to Pakistan? You know, what if it wasn't Murder on the Orient Express, but it was, I don't know, Murder in the Khyber Pass or something. So I really love Agatha Christie, and so I wanted to bring that in. This is terrible of me, but I love Indiana Jones. I know in the end he was a grave robber, but I love Indiana Jones, and I could read 1,000 Indiana Jones mysteries if he had been a novel character. Um, so I guess they were both in my head. And there's a Pakistani singer named Arooj Aftab, whose music I was listening to while I was writing this. I don't know for what particular reason, but I was listening to it over and over again. I think she just kind of encapsulated the mood of what Gul was going through. And so I just had it on repeat, and I listened to a lot of Pakistani music because it just kind of took me. You know, some of this book was written in Pakistan, but some of it was written in London, and there was an immediacy that comes from, you know, immersing yourself back in the music of your childhood or your culture. So for me, that was really helpful. I don't know about you, Zoe. What was good for you?
The last thing you said was really helpful in reminding me that for Daphne, in terms of what I listened to a lot of Afrobeat, which is maybe not a surprise, right? Considering that that's also Daphne's world. So I got really into Francophone, like sort of Afrobeat from the Francophone world, like putting together playlists, making, playlists for myself of different songs that I liked, and that it just helped me to kind of get to know Daphne, I think, in a different way, which I really liked. And then I also, at one point, deep in revisions, I think this was like me in the dark place. I listened to a lot of not Bad Bunny's recent album, but the one right before that, where he's just very like melancholy and kind of wailing about how nobody loves him, which he does a lot, but in this particular album, like was really doing. And would listen to that while I was revising. As far as I think what inspired me, I mean, so similarly, I grew up also reared on Agatha Christie. In terms of where maybe a more of a comedic voice comes from, similarly in a British context, I grew up with a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, which explains, I think, some of my approaches to wit and humor. And then my part of my family is British Jamaican, so Jamaican diaspora born in the UK, and mostly in Birmingham, actually. So I was reared on British crime shows as well. So whether it's Midsummer Murders or later on things like Father Brown and the like, I would watch that with my parents. And so that's had a lot of influence. And then I think what started changing things for me about maybe 10 years ago, was starting to make a concerted effort to read mysteries by authors of color, and realizing that you could have a person of color as the protagonist, as the hero, as the heroine, so to speak. And then it became really fun to start imagining, well, what would I do, or like what kind of character could I create? And so I'm so thankful both to crime writers of color in general, in the group, and then just beyond that, and to also the romance world. The romance world, in terms of romance fiction, has gone through a huge transformation of celebrating queer authors, authors of color, etc. And it really made it possible for me to imagine that I could also write a story that could be read one day.
I love romance novels. That's good. Yeah. Regency, particularly. Yeah. That's so interesting. So you have this diaspora of influences and cultures in your life.
I do. Yeah, which I think, obviously it found its way into Daphne's world as well. It felt familiar, although in this case, the Francophone stuff is less familiar, but that's been really fun to get to know. It's been fun to get to know, I think different parts of French West Africa, former French West Africa, and as well as explore the Caribbean, things like that, explore food, explore culture, TV shows, books, movies. It's like a hobby within a hobby or something like that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that question.
Oh, sorry.
I love asking that question because I feel like it just builds the world out for readers so much more. And it's just not all obviously inherent in the book, but to know that, and to, if you recognize or resonate with any of the things that you were thinking about when you were writing the novel, really deepens, I think, the reading experience. So thank you for sharing those things. We're coming up on just about 10 minutes left. So if anybody's got some questions, we've already got one there in the chat. But please do send them our way for Zoe and Maha, and we will ask them. Alexa asks, who is your favorite academic sleuth of all time? We've mentioned some already, so you can repeat if you would like. But thanks, Alexa, for your question.
Oh, wow.
That's a really hard question.
That is, I'm like, why did she have to scare us this way? Yeah, I mean, I have a couple right off the bat that I'm thinking about. So in terms of landmark books, I think one of the first books featuring a woman professor in American academia's death in a tenured position is from the 80s, right? That's kind of a legendary text. I mean, of course, there's Dorothy Sayers. Oh, okay, well, here we go, right? So in terms of like other Gaudy Night, right, and works like that get into a kind of academic setting. And then for me, years ago, I read, and this also helped me to realize I could also probably try to write my own books. But I read the Ruth Galloway mysteries by Ali Griffiths. I forgot what the first one was called, but it featured a British archaeologist, a woman who gets called in to investigate a body that they can't figure out if it's like 2 years old or 2,000 years old, right? Like how long it's been there. So that I think was the first example as well of realizing I could find a female academic who could do this kind of sleuthing work. Because, and again, this is why I like that we're both together. There's so much of academic mysteries that are set from the student's point of view, but there's just fewer out there, I think, capturing from the professor's side. So that allowed me to kind of imagine that.
I mean, I have to say, I was going to say Ellie Griffiths too, because she's got these great characters who are archaeologists and brilliant. But I don't have anyone specifically in mind, other than to say that I just love some strong kind of female protagonists who, whatever their careers, end up in unexpected places. And thanks to Soho, I ended up meeting Sujata Massey recently, and I fell in love with her character, Praveen Mystery. I wanted to be her best friend. And she's a lawyer from the 1920s, a Parsi lawyer in India. So, having just read that, she's reading the series. She's definitely in my head now, and I think she's brilliant.
Yes, Sujata is a gem. Perfect. Thank you, Alexa, for that question. Send over any more if you've got them, but otherwise, we will end before we announce gift card winners by asking you both what is next for you, which I know is the worst question because you're just like, I just did so much. What do you mean? But I'm going to ask it to you anyway. What's next for you?
Well, it's really interesting because we're both writing series, right? So it's lovely to think these characters are living on. In my case, Gul is knee deep into another murder, but she's exploring sort of the mythologies of reincarnation at the moment. So, the Indian subcontinent has a history of sort of folklore and religion and sort of religious heritage of sort of the idea of mysticism of reincarnation. Interestingly, not in Islam, but the other kind of religious heritage sort of supports that. And so I was really interested in that. So Gul has dived deep into a reincarnation murder, and also is looking at the world of feudalism in Pakistan, which is a world I'm very interested in.
Oh, wow. I'm so excited to read this one.
Where is Daphne?
Well, yeah. So in my case, I am also in the midst of writing book 2. This is going to get into the long history and politics of racial passing in the 19th and 20th century. So there is going to involve some amount of historical research, actually, in a bunch of different contexts to try to get at the present day, murder, of course, and try to figure out or uncover all kinds of different truths. So it's fun, if I can say it's fun. It is kind of fun to dive into this kind of longer history, going back to Nella Larsen's novel in the 1920s on passing and things like that. So yeah, I'm excited.
I think we should have a little goal where we both put some very obscure, very weird historical fact.
Oh wow! Yes,
George Washington's teeth and
Washington. Oh yes. 1960s Mummy Brown, 100% needs to be in the next novel. Yeah.
I'll try and find some random but interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding. I really think this is somehow going to the next novel. Yeah, it's too good to let go. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that Daphne's living on as a character. That makes me very happy.
And likewise with you with Gul as well. It's going to be really great to spend time with her again. And her motley crew, I feel like. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I guess we're waiting on gift card winners still. The raffle is raffling. Do we want to talk about side characters? Because we have some really fantastic ones in here. Just really quick. We have obviously 2 really wonderful protagonists, and then we have these really colorful, quirky casts of folks that kind of help them out. Can you each tell me a little bit about maybe your favorite side character and how you painted them? Because there's a few that really stand out to me as a reader, but I'm curious what your favorites are.
Well, I'll just go really quickly. So mine is Mrs. Fernandez, who is a great sidekick. I wanted Gul to have some love in her life because I wanted a maternal figure because she didn't have one, but I also had the scariest PE teacher in school named Miss Disa, who basically was Miss Fernandez, and she called everyone Charlie. And she expected very, very good things from all of you, including people like me who were not blessed in the PE department. So she's sort of stuck in my head. But she's my favorite.
I love that. I have many characters. Her parents are great, Jim and Fabiola. Fabiola is the stern West African immigrant mother who is terrifying to everybody, but also extremely loving. And the loving itself is terrifying. But I think I love, and most people I think love Sadie, who is a mathematician who has a rap sheet. She was in an anarchist punk band. She once wrestled a televangelist to the ground. And she has a storied past, so she's a fun one. Yeah.
I
Yes,
like that our
Sadie
side
and Miss
characters
Renee.
often bullying people. They're often bullying our protagonists. I think that
They're Wait, what are they doing? What are they doing?
they're quite formidable, our sidekicks, and they're often bullying the protagonist into doing things. I love it.
It's true. Yeah. That's bossy and bullying.
Yeah.
They're so great. Those Sadie and Ms. Fernandez were my favorites. So
Yeah.
thanks for reading my mind. I caught on, I suppose. Thank you both so much for your time. You're both obviously very busy, and this has just really been wonderful. Exactly what we needed today. So thank you. We are going to announce the gift card winners. I think I neglected to mention this at the top of the show, but always we do a little giveaway at the end of these events so that you can go and support Mystery to Me by buying some books from them and falling in love with a new local bookstore. So we have 3 gift cards to give away that you all were entered in automatically just for signing up. So today we have a $25 gift card going to Denise Gendusa. Congratulations, Denise. We have a $50 gift card going to Amy Padden. Congratulations. I need to get like a little clapper for these things next time. And then we have a $75 gift card going to Michelle Vacchio. So thank you for attending. We will email you, Elizabeth at Mystery to Me will email you with the information on how you can redeem that. Even if you're not in Wisconsin, if you're anywhere, you can redeem this gift card. And you can perhaps go buy these wonderful books that we talked about today. So Zoe, Maha, again, thank you so much for being here. Go read The Museum Detective. Go pre-order History Lessons. And we'll see you in May for the next event.
Amazing.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much for having me, really, and putting
Thanks
this
for
all
having
together.
me.
And thank you to everyone for coming.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks, all. Have a good day.